Welcome to the NFL salary exploitation for Week 12. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay. We need to shout someone out real quick. Greg Burrows, who enlightened us all last week with what you brought up a cadaverous, yeah. And it's a dead body that's ready for dissection. How you thought of that and worked that into our show?
I felt enlightened a little. Like I didn't, I wasn't like levitating enlightened, but I was like, huh.
It was one of those, I took a minute and I, rubbed my chin and was like, okay.
If I were to have guessed what it meant, I would have assumed it was like a sardine or something.
I was thinking more knife, like butcher's knife. I know it's not that, but that's just what popped into my head.
Yeah.
Because it's a cleaver, as the butcher's type knife, the huge thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, on to this week 12. You're looking at quarterbacks here that are fairly in good spots and they're pretty cheap.
Yeah, Derek Carr against Carolina. Obviously, Luke Kuechly's going to be out this week. If he's not, then we should probably all quit football if he's not out this week. If he is, though, that's the heart and soul of this Panthers defense. Their secondary's been bad all year. Get to face Derek Carr and the Raiders this week. Carr and Cooper, that stack's going to be sick. Carper, Crabtree, and that's all. We're done talking about them. I can't come back from that mistake. So
I've done that before. We've combined names before.
Yeah, well, that's not happening today. So Russell Wilson against the Buccaneers, 6,700 on DK, 7,500 on FanDuel. He's back. You see him running around like a madman back there, just dropping dimes to Jimmy Graham off one foot. Doug Baldwin certainly looking just as good as he was last week. I think this is, you stack the Seahawks until they make Russell Wilson 8K on FanDuel and 7,500 on DK. You just throw them in there regardless of opponent. Obviously, the Buccaneers aren't something you're afraid of if you are, looking to use Wilson.
The first thing that I looked at this week was I came to you and said Seattle's super cheap this week.
Yes, you did say that. Can confirm.
You can confirm that I did say that. Baldwin's cheap. Graham's, appropriately priced, but it's still fairly cheap for him. Running backs here, Melvin Gordon on the road at Houston. What do you see in his prices this week?
Yeah, obviously on FanDuel you're paying up. I just look at DK and say 7K for a guy that's getting 25 touches a week is a deal. And this Houston defense, it's good, but it has weaknesses that can be exploited. And, as we've seen with Phillip Rivers and this Chargers offense, they kind of figure out a way down the fields. Like, the only way to describe Phillip Rivers is like he just somehow forces his terrible teammates to like, come on, guys. And then he ends up throwing a game-crushing interception at the end. But for most of the game, he figures it out. And, I like Melvin Gordon, but generally speaking, I think Rivers is so good at figuring out ways to get him open, especially out of the backfield. We talk about the running, but really the last 4 or 5 weeks, the difference for Gordon and his fantasy production is, is 4 to 5 receptions a week. That's really the big difference.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you look at him, in terms of consistency, there's been a couple of guys, but he's up in that elite tier.
Yeah. So. And he's still not priced that way on DK. So, yeah, I just think that's a nice deal. And it's looking like he's just going to stay there, even though he's scoring, 24 points a game. I think he's just going to stay in that range. So I'll continue to use him.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. Another one here, kind of an opposite spot in terms of a matchup. Giovanni Bernard obviously done for the year with the injury. No AJ Green this week for sure. Jeremy Hill, 3,900, basically, near bare minimum on both sides.
Yeah, Baltimore is certainly a team to be afraid of, and he's just a tournament guy this week. 5,900 on FanDuel. It's tough to predict a a rushing touchdown against this Ravens defense. I just kind of look at the last time he was the feature back, which was 2014, when Eifert and AJ Green and Gio were all sort of banged up. That's when he came into form. That's when he sort of showed, what type of player he is. And I think, he's going to move back into that feature role. They're not going to split it with any of the, the guys they have behind him. So he's going to get 20 to 25 touches. And at 3,900 on DK, I think you just fire away.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly opens up a lot of salary. I mean, as you mentioned, I think he's going to need the touchdown to really pay it off. I mean, I know, obviously I don't see him getting like 80 yards, but 15 a score I think is doable.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they use him more in the receiving game, like they did a few years ago. I think that was an underrated part of his development as a rookie. He was used a little bit in the receiving game. And if that's the case, should be a lot easier on DK to hit value.
Yeah, definitely at 3,900 with that full point PPR scoring. Wideouts here, Rishard Matthews coming off a very solid week. His FanDuel price is still, I mean, obviously 5,800 is nice, but FanDuel continues to be relatively underpriced.
Yeah, 5,800. I'm okay with both of these prices, actually. It's clear that he's become the top receiving option. I wasn't a big fan headed into the year. And when they brought in Andre Johnson, I thought, that was a reasonable reason to once again fade him. But I mean, he showed early in the season in small samples that he could do it. And as he's growing in his role, as this offense is becoming more efficient, he's just proving to be a pretty viable player. So I'm certainly okay with this against the Bears. They activated one of their corners this week, but who knows how many snaps he's going to play. So I like Rishard Matthews quite a bit, and I think he's not necessarily in cash game play, but he's certainly a viable tournament option once again. And I think people might think this production's a little fluky, but I don't necessarily see it that way.
No, I definitely agree. I think, over the stretch of weeks here, obviously come off a big target performance. I mean, lately it's been his use inside the red zone that we've noticed really, taking uptick. Obviously the touchdowns, was at an unsustainable pace, but, no touchdown this week and he still hit value.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Tyler Boyd here, obviously with the news to AJ Green, going to get a Ravens, secondary that I don't mind targeting. I mean, I think if there's any point of targeting the Ravens, it's more certainly for the pass for me, and Boyd pretty cheap and came in and made an immediate impact there when Green went down.
Yeah, so the first few weeks there's going to be, and I should say / Brandon LaFell here, because we don't know who's going to take that prominent role as the number one receiver. I mean, we could see LaFell jump into that role and then, get the benefit of that, but much more of a DK play. But at 4,000, sort of like I just look at Boyd. I like his talent, second round pick out of Pittsburgh, obviously was an extremely versatile player in college. He's the type of guy that can beat you in multiple ways. So if they truly need someone to make a play, he's just more viable. How they used Mohamed Sanu the past few years before he obviously went to Atlanta is kind of how I envision them looking to want to use Boyd in the future. He's not quite the same athlete, but he's certainly a more nuanced player. So, against this Baltimore team, I just think he could see, pretty volatile, but I could see 6 to 10 targets with the way this offense is now constructed. So I think you're willing to take the chance on the upside here.
Yeah, I think so too. And obviously, if Smith doesn't play like as he did last week, they lose a top corner. Outside of that, I mean, there's a couple of good ones, but nothing that I'm really going to be shying away from. And obviously, I still think Andy Dalton in this offense, they're not going to just drop off the map. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to expect. Obviously, you'd want a better matchup in the first week, surprise people with Jeremy Hill or surprise people with Tyler Boyd. In a good matchup, you're going to get really low ownership. Interdivision matchups usually yield pretty even results in terms of scores. I mean, how else would the Rams be able to stay close with the Seahawks? Nobody knows, because they're the worst franchise ever created in the world. So, that game yesterday was just anyway, Boyd, yeah, 4K, sure. FanDuel, a little less viable at 56, but I'm okay with it.
So I think that transitions us into Devontae Parker, since we just talked about the Rams. Crushing your dreams.
Clinching. They deserved it, though. The Rams deserved that loss. They let the Dolphins hang around. The Dolphins played horrible all game, and they let them hang around, and that's what you get. So good for the Dolphins. They certainly earned that one. Devontae Parker, over 100 yards 2 games ago, obviously caught 70 yards in the receiving touchdown last week. I just, he's a first-round pick. He's super athletic. They're using him on deep routes. They're using him on short routes. They're using him in the red zone. This is what we expected when they drafted him. Obviously, Jay Ajayi is crushing Jarvis Landry's value. I know he ended up with that touchdown where they literally, Jesus came onto the field and carried him into the end zone. But Devontae Parker at 4,700 on DK, 6,300 on FanDuel. He certainly got upside. This guy's a super athlete, so and very talented. So, getting 8 to 10 targets a week is going to yield solid results.
Yeah, it definitely is. We were talking before, tight ends this week.
It's just awful. It's pathetic. I wrote in Vance McDonald and CJ Fedora. I don't like either of those guys, clearly. Vance McDonald's my boy. I like him. But, he's getting those 6 targets a week. That's great when you're 2,700. When you add in that extra 300 and you're over the 3K, it's really not that appealing anymore, But
no, it's not.
But I will say, at those 6 targets a week, he gets much more out of each catch than most tight ends do. And obviously, with sort of the fluky system that Colin Kaepernick-led offense creates chaos for the secondary, because they're waiting to see those option runs and where they're going, and Vance McDonald's running to the other side of the field. He's already got 2 70-plus receiving touchdown, 70-plus yard receiving touchdowns this year. He's a big play threat. Former second-round pick, obviously, still really cheap. I don't mind it at 6 targets if you're looking to pay down. I just don't like paying down this week, I guess.
I don't either. We were talking about the Martellus Bennett. Obviously, that was a disappointing play this week. His price is on the rise here in week 12. And there, outside of that, there's really just nothing else that really appeals to me outside of a couple top options. We don't have Jordan Reed. Gronkowski's possibly out again. We do have Jimmy Graham, but outside of that, it's a whole lot of nothing. So.
I put in CJ Fedorowicz as well. I don't mind that play. He's been a really consistent part of the offense of late as well, but not optimal either. I think, getting Greg Olsen this week should be a main goal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you look at these, I think DraftKings is obviously always a little bit different in terms of tight ends than FanDuel. I think that's where you see pretty much the biggest difference when you and I do our tight end pieces, because you can fit in those guys a little bit easier on FanDuel, those top price guys, but DraftKings you can dive down to really open up the salary. And I think these two are probably the more viable options to do that with.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Defenses here, obviously we talked about the Bengals, but we also talked about, the tough matchup that's there, and obviously the Ravens, being in play this week.
Yeah, Andy Dalton is a guy that benefits from having one of, if not the best supporting cast in football when they're all healthy. Tyler Eifert, AJ Green, Gio Bernard, Jeremy Hill. Always has had great secondary receiving options with Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu. It's going to get ugly for him. We've seen him, when he plays in the playoffs, the interceptions tend to flow. I think this could be a game like that, but, I still think some of the secondary options are viable because they could be in comeback mode for most of this game. However, I just think the Ravens pick six upside is big here. Sack upside is big here. This should be, over 10 points against this rendition of the Bengals offense.
And I mean, Baltimore obviously coming off a tough week. Any matchup on the road at Dallas is just tough for opposing defenses with how they play football. And given the fact that their offensive line is just the best in the league, they control the game clock. They keep you out there for 8 minutes at a time. Bengals are not like that one bit. So, definitely an easier one here. You look at the Titans defense, on the road at Chicago. Obviously, Chicago's offense put up more than I expected, but still lost Zach Miller, no Alshon Jeffrey. They're just mush around Jay Cutler.
It's just a mush. I mean, I don't know why you described it that way, but I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. It's just nothing. They just have nothing. There's nothing. There's no viable skill position players on that team anymore.
Well, Jordan Howard's there.
Yes. Jordan Howard's fine. Jordan Howard is good. He's a good player.
You don't want to roll out some Paulson at tight end this week?
Oh. I mean, Cameron Meredith has actually been pretty good per catch this year and per target, but it just doesn't seem like they want to install him as a prominent player with Jay Cutler's offense. So I just don't see that as viable. Eddie Royal, whatever.
It worked better under Hoyer, who spread the ball out.
Titans have played Luck twice and Rodgers in recent weeks, and that's kind of made their numbers go down. They're still pretty decent, They're not horrible. So I kind of like them, in a lot of different ways this week.
Anyone facing Parrish Cox, though, I'll still fire away.
Fair. Yeah. Fair.
Yes.
He was bad. He's bad.
They do have a good pass rush. I do think that's going to get to Jay Cutler quite a bit. Jay Cutler, I mean, he's just a flip of the coin in terms of what Jay Cutler you're going to get. And I think this is one where we just see bad cigarette hanging out of his mouth, Jay Cutler.
And it's not even like game to game. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get pass to pass. Like you don't huddle to huddle. You don't even know what you're going to get. Like he's throwing dimes one play, and the very next, it's like he's throwing an out of control, like wobbly into the secondary, softly into the corner's hands. It's like, what is going on? It's wild to watch. And obviously people. It's
kind of like our pods, to be honest.
Yeah, it really is. Or when we do like the third one, actually, no, it's like from topic to topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's position to position even. I mean, we're just like
when I threw out Dwayne Allen last week, it was kind of like a wobbly ball into the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, like in the red zone. Like that was your last one. So you worked down the field with 4 other tight ends, got into the red zone.
That was like my Case
with
Keenum.
Dwayne Allen.
Yeah, that was like my Case Keenum. Like, I'm actually made a few good passes, and then just firing right into a zone. And
double coverage, yeah.
Double coverage that I just didn't see. There's a guy standing right in front of him. That was me last week with Dwayne Allen. But what are you going to do?
We have those games. We all have those games. So it's going to wrap things up with the Week 12 salary exploitation. If you want to check out Russ's article, head on over to DaveFantasyCafe.com to give it a look. And check out the rest of our Week 12 content that will be rolling out throughout the week.